Welcome to The Hype Within, exploring journeys of authentic leadership and growth. On the show, tech leaders will share their stories of developing their leadership skills and challenges they faced along the way. You'll learn about their approaches to self-reflection and personal growth, and how they've been able to build a foundation of authenticity that has propelled them to success. I'm your host, Hannah Jacover, B2B marketing leader turned leadership and executive coach. Are you ready to get hyped up? Let's dive in. Hello, leaders. Welcome back to The Hype Within. I am so excited about today's episode and guest, Mark Koester, who's here with us today. I had the pleasure of interviewing his wife, Lauren Koester, a little while back. And Lauren was also a guest that when we had her on was a little bit of a different angle because of the role that she was in. And it was a very people operations role, which I was excited to bring on to the show. And now with Mark, he's also bringing a really cool angle to the show and a very different industry than what we're used to. And so Mark Koester is the fitness product manager at Active Wellness. And we're going to dive into how he balances managing multiple teams and what would you call is it fitness centers or?
Sure. Yeah. Centers works.
Okay. And fitness centers and his leadership strategies around that and really what the challenges are. So welcome to the show, Mark. How are you?
I'm good. First, thank you for having me on. I'm excited to be here. I've listened to probably about every episode, not just my favorite episode, which of course is my wife's, but they are stacked, really great content. So I'm happy to hopefully add something that people can take home of value.
Yes, thank you. I'm excited to hear that you've been listening. I have one listener at least out there. I'll say because I know my dad listens as well.
There you go. Strong audience. Two really passionate people.
Yes, he's my biggest fan.
I love it.
Awesome. I gave just a very high level introduction, but why don't you tell us a little bit about you and your journey and maybe weave it into kind of your leadership style and the way that you view that?
Cool. Yeah, happy to. So I guess we'll go back a few bit to really just trying to give you the full picture of who I am, where I'm at. First and foremost, I'm a husband to my wonderful wife, as I mentioned, and I'm also a dad of a 3-year-old. So those are my real jobs. The other jobs I just do to pay my bills. So I am the product manager over at Active Wellness. We're a fitness company. We specialize in brick and mortar, but largely with management companies, and we'll manage corporate locations or medical centers. We're very turnkey. So we'll come in, we'll do your operations, your HR, your program development, et cetera. I oversee the product side. So what tech we're using, but also the people side of that. So what tech do our teams use to deliver quality services or high quality services? That could be anything from staff development, which is where I largely spend my time, to literally building our stack and what's going to come next as far as our member journey goes. Before all of that, so I've been in this industry about 15 years at various levels. I've had some relative success, which I'm really happy about, worked hard for. But prior to that, I was actually in finance. I used to manage accounts. I used to be that guy on the phone that was like, give me $10,000 today. And I hated it. I was out of school and I thought that this could be the new Boiler Room, the new Wolf of Wall Street. That was going to be me. But in reality, what happened was I just was like a super depressed individual. I was well over 300 pounds. I smoked too much, drank too much, terribly unhappy. And so I made that change. And that's how I came about to fitness. And that's actually why I tell you that, because that really tells a story about who I am today, because the backbone of that was I was sad and depressed and in a role facing a dream that wasn't really my dream. It was just what was happening around me. And there was no human element to it. And so now, as a leader of many or someone who tries to be a leader of many, the human element is super important to me. That's the first and foremost thing in all of my conversations with everyone. So it's about connecting with folks and really helping them live fulfilling and joyful life. Whether it's with us or without us, it's really more important that you live a happy life, not that you do it working for my company, although you will likely do both. But ultimately, that's where I'm at. That's who I am today. I'm really happy to be in this position and really happy to be in front of a lot of team members it's really cool to give advice to someone and then they turn around and implement it and boom, they have new clients or they're bringing in new revenue or they made some new income that they didn't think they were going to make. That's the best part of my job for sure.
That is an awesome journey. You just gave me a little thread to pull on.
Uh-oh.
Because we do, we have, as a coach, I see this, right? People are can be so unhappy in their jobs that they thought were going to be so fulfilling for them. And then they're at this point in their life where they want to make a change, but they feel stuck and they don't necessarily know what change to make. They don't know how to make it. And so this is something I coach on a lot. It's something I talk about a lot in workshops and whatnot. But so, like, you being in that position, what was the process that you went through to get yourself unstuck
Mm,
from that oppressive state where you said, no, I'm going to make this change? What did you have to do to take action?
that's a great question. I wish there was one simple answer. It was a period of time. It was a lot of things that happened. It's never one thing, right? It's multitudes of something that ultimately made me turn the corner. I work in fitness now, right? And it's funny to me that the thing that might have kicked this all off was, as I mentioned earlier, I was 300 pounds overweight, obese. And I started to go to the gym during my lunch break or after work. I would go to the gym, and when I would get back, my boss would yell at me, and he would be like, "Where were you? You weren't being productive. You're supposed to be on the phone. You're supposed to be calling clients." And I was trying. I was really trying to better myself. And ultimately, we know that fitness betters your work ethic, et cetera. But I knew that I needed to make a change. And this person was literally shaming me for it. And so
Mhm.
who knows? I'm not going to blame them for what they did. It's just added layers to my story. But that was the first point. And then I realized, okay, I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep getting in trouble. That's fine. And then I also started to realize that the things I was working for or towards, they weren't really going to make me happy. You know what I mean? My screensaver was like at the time, like a BMW M3 blue. And I was like, this is going to be the car. I didn't really want that. That's still not important to me. So it wasn't important to me then, but I thought it was important to me. You know what I mean? So anyway, I started to realize this like facade I was putting out wasn't truly me. I was supposed to be like a stone cold killer on the phone. I'm very good at sales. I'll applaud myself for that, but I'm not a stone cold killer. That's not my tactic. That's not the way it goes. So anyway, so I was just a person that I didn't want to be, and I wasn't proud to be. And I knew that I had to make big changes. And funny thing about that is I actually had to quit twice. I quit, and then they didn't take my resignation. So they called me like 2 weeks later. Yeah, they called me like 2 weeks later, and they were like, you didn't show up for work. And I was like, I quit. What do you not get? We're done. And they were like, oh, all right. Like it took them a second. I guess it probably happens. People like they just make decisions that aren't really maybe are irrational or rushed. But anyway, yeah, it was time to make a change. And so I pulled back, and I knew that I didn't know where to go, but I knew I needed to change. So I stepped back. I took a job that was low stress, and I started to focus on myself. I went to the gym, started eating right, started building my relationships, and I started getting in shape, and it started working out for me. And I started to realize that the people around me were drawn to that positive energy. The way I was feeling was helping people feel better. I'll never forget it. One of my buddies, who's still a great friend of mine, after the 15th person asked me for advice on how to lose weight, because I lost over 100 pounds in a period of time. And he was like, that's like the 10th person. You should probably do this for a living. And I was like, oh yeah. Like it all just dawned on me. And we sat there in my backyard. I'll never forget it. We called a couple gyms, and the first gym was like, your story is insane. We'll hire you on the spot. And I said, great, here we go.
Wow.
And that's how it all kickstarted. It's pretty cool.
That's an amazing journey. Oh my gosh. You said a couple things that I think really stand out and tie into what you're doing now. And I hear this too, where it's like that word, you said the word productive, right? Like your boss would shame you for not being quote unquote productive, but you were being productive,
Right.
right? And I think we always need to look at that word and look at how we define that word, productivity, instead of it being this output that is so focused on the bottom line for somebody else.
Mm,
Broaden that view of productivity can mean so many different things, and it can mean things that are going to just benefit you and your being and your ability to not burn out, your ability to live a better life. Like what you were doing was productive. It just
right.
wasn't productive for that human. And then for me, that ties into that like human element. And I think that can be a part of it is even just looking at what does that word mean? That wasn't used in a way that tied into the human element. It was used in a way that was strictly to elevate the bottom line and make somebody else more money. And clearly, like going through this journey and thinking about like, these material things, these attachments aren't what actually make me anymore. I just think it's so fascinating. And to think about your motivators and to become more intrinsically motivated versus those external things like the BMW and the money and the title and the mask that you want to wear. I just think it's such a valuable lesson to look at all of those things and reframe.
For sure. You nailed it. When we talk about like defining success, like this person's successful, it's all subjective, right? What's success to you? Is being a good mother, father, parent, caregiver, is that the most important thing to you? Sure, maybe it is. Or are you most focused on being the number one revenue driver in your company? Yeah, maybe that's the thing for you. And so I think as leaders, or know as leaders, we have to be in tune to that. We have to say, what's Mark's goal? What does this person want to do why are they here first of all? Is it just because I was the closest job available to them, or do they want to be in insert blank field? And so then you say, okay, this is how I can motivate this person if I want to motivate them, or if they need to be motivated. But by waving car keys in front of me, that's going to do nothing to me. That's not going to motivate me. But if you tell me you're going to be able to help a lot of people, I'm like, all right, cool, let's do it. This is what I want to do. And I think everyone says the same thing. To manage different people, you have to know how to manage different personalities. That's obviously so true. And we all applaud ourselves for being so versatile with it, but we still manage the same way. We still treat people the same way, KPIs, all these other things. We try to force people into our box. And unfortunately, that's why a lot of leaders or people who want to be leaders are so frustrated, because they are trying to follow this model that isn't going to give them the success they want. There's no human element to it. You'd have to know why people are doing what they're doing. And also, earlier you mentioned it's so short-sighted. Like, I was going to the gym, I was trying to eat healthier, and that's going to make me a better employee. So long-term, it is a better financial decision for them to let me go to the gym and let me eat well and let me do fun things. But it's so short-sighted to be like, don't do this, be on the phone. So if you're selfishly looking to get a better bottom line, then you need to do these things too. Like, it benefits you on both sides to let people breathe, let them do the things that make them feel happy, because they're going to be better. They're going to be better employees, and they're going to live a more fulfilling life, which ultimately helps you, if that's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. This approach that you have with your team, it's like you did that for yourself first. You understood, okay, what are my motivators? How do I define success? And now you're able to do that for your team. And that always, to me, brings up the way that I like to look at leadership development is really, it starts with developing yourself as a leader and leading yourself.
Sure.
And then you can lead others, and then you can empower others and help inspire them to go through that process for themselves, and everything that you're talking about in terms of discovering how your team is motivated. So I'm thinking about that process. What leadership skills and maybe interpersonal skills do you have, or did you have to acquire to be that leader for your team?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's continuously flowing, right? There's things that I'm working on now that I'll hopefully be better at down the road. But I think ultimately I'm not the manager I am today, or it wasn't the manager I am today 10 years ago, right? There's two stories I can think of. Early in my career, something that I did was I would go from fitness center to fitness center. So if you were struggling, they would send me there, and I would make you better, right? I would clean you up. I'd bring in revenue. I'd help you hire new staff. And then I would move on to another one. So I'd spend about 6 months at each spot. So it could be a fitness center, but that could apply to any sort of revenue line or business line. Anyways, I was actually applying to another organization out of the company, totally different field. And it dawned on me in the interview process, because they said, what makes you so confident you can be a manager for us? And I said, all the centers or the gyms that I work at, the teams generally want to follow me. So the trainers, we help them create this new business line, and they love working with me. And so when I go on to the new location, some of them request to come with me. And I was saying that, look at me, everybody wants to be around me. And this person in the interview process was like, that's sign of a weak manager. You didn't give them the skills to be on their own. You brought them to the water, you fished, you cut the fish for them, and you fed them. You didn't really teach them how to do anything on their own. And so that was a really big moment for me to realize, oh, okay, cool. Like, being a strong leader or being a solid manager is helping people gain the skills so they can be successful with or without you. They won't leave because you've trained them enough and they want to be around you and your growth, but they should be able to. You don't want to feel like your team members are stuck with you because they need you to grow. I want my team members to be able to go to any company and kick ass. Like, you worked here and now you're here. Amazing. You're my top employee. That makes me happy. So I realized early on in my career that I was failing people, actually. Like, I realized that I needed to work more on giving skills than to just like doing things on my own. That's something I continue to work on. That's like a big aspect of what I do here. Am I doing the job for you, or am I teaching you how to do the job for yourself down the line? So that's super important. I think it's good for me. It's something I'm always trying to work on is being very clear about what I want you to do or I'm hoping you do. And so then not only do I say, hey, we want to do this. Let's say I want you to get to the number 10, which is make up a fake goal. And you're at 8. Here's why I want you to get to 10. Here's where it benefits all of us for you to get to the number 10, let's say dollars raised. And then just give them the support they need and then let them do the thing they need to do. Like back off, give them space, let them figure it out, ask them if they need help, offer support, offer help. And then if they do it, applaud them, praise them. And if they don't, then find out why. It may have been your fault. Maybe I made the mistake. So those are two things that are similar, but yet separate in that I'm trying to teach people or even myself to be autonomous, do things on their own for the same end result.
That really highlights to me this difference between manager and leader. And I think they're intertwined. There are some things that both leaders and managers need to do, but it's maybe just through a different lens. And it's like that manager where you weren't helping them develop the skills. And yeah, maybe they followed you for that reason, but the leader side where it's like they want to follow you because of who you are and how you make them feel and how you inspire them. And they do have the skills. They do understand how to do the work. And it's the reason they're following you. So I think you can look at that as a negative through a manager lens, but you can look at it through a leadership lens as a positive, so long as you've done that work and helped them develop the skills. And then it also gets me thinking about delegation, because this is like something that new managers struggle with so much. A lot of my new managers in the past have struggled with this. I see a lot of my coachees struggle with this. So how do you view approaching delegation? How did you build that? I like to call it a ladder of delegation. But how did you work towards that autonomy for your team?
Yeah, great. So the ladder analogy is perfect because I believe it is steps. I think you have to start small and say, hey, can you do this one thing? Then do it well, right? Like a small task, don't give them the $10 million deal if they haven't sold a $5 deal yet. So start small and build trust. But remember that it's a learning opportunity. So you've got to be there for somebody and give them the support they need. So if you say, I need you to do, or I'd like you to do this, you think you can do it. First, get them to say yes or no, right? Get their buy-in. And then ask them if they see any challenges. Do you think this is going to be hard for you? If so, what might it be? What can we do now to prepare you for the challenges that would be from stopping you from achieving this task? And then once we're clear on what the goal is, the timeline, what the expectation is, then give them, as I said earlier, give them room to breathe and see how it goes, but be there for them. You have to make sure that you're following up, asking how it's going. You want to create an environment where trying isn't a mistake. You want to create an environment where trying is applauded, even if there's failure. Like you tried, that's awesome. I want to make sure that you have the space to try and give the effort. And if you fail, that's cool. We'll work on it. This is a process. We hope to be together for a long period of time. And so I'm not going to judge you on your first failure, so to speak. I've made plenty of them. I'm going to make more. So I think letting people know that making a mistake or again, using the word failure, but it's okay. It's perfectly fine. And so that way they feel comfortable coming to you. I once had a manager who I came into my one-on-one check-in with them. It was like a bi-monthly, so twice a month. And we sat down. She said, what do you have? And I was like, oh, I don't really have anything. What do you have? And she canceled the meeting on the fly, as she should, because it was a waste of her time. She said, next time we have this meeting, come prepared with questions and answers or questions and queries. And that really made me, okay, start thinking about questions you might have. Like I had to come up with questions, right? Like I had to get into the habit of learning how to ask questions. That's something that's not my greatest skill. So I have to think about what questions I want to ask. And then don't be afraid to ask them. Like you have to ask the questions because you need to do your job well. So I think if you create an environment where people are scared to talk in meetings or scared to ask questions, you're going to fail. Like you're going to leave very little room for growth and productivity because there is none. You're shutting it down. If you're going into a meeting and you're running the meeting, saying the beginning, saying the middle, saying the end, and telling people what to do, that was also a waste. Why'd you bring all of us together if you were just going to talk into an echo chamber? So give people the opportunity to speak up and ask questions, even if they're silly, so to speak.
Yeah, so many good thoughts. And what I hear you describing really is that psychological safety
Yes.
and component of that, the trust, the environment where making mistakes is okay, where asking questions is okay, where being curious is okay. I just think that is critical for a thriving team. And it sounds like too, I can see maybe based on what I'm hearing, like you didn't get that in your
Right.
finance role. with the manager who's shaming you. It's like the opposite of psychological safety.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Psychological safety. I think I was listening to a podcast and I think I heard it on yours, but there was another podcast I was listening to and I forget the author. She wrote the theory on it. Anyway, it's the best. It makes the most sense to me. Like having that safe net where it's not that everything flies, right? It's still got to be professional and growth focused, but you should have the room to say the things you need to say because maybe you're going to come up with something really great or you're never going to learn unless you try. Simple. So let your team members try. And I definitely did not get that support in my finance role. And then past that, like I had to learn to get that support, if that makes sense. Like I had to learn not to be the quiet one in the meeting all the time. Or if that was the case, because sometimes that's hard, right? Not everyone wants to speak in a room full of people, especially if there's like hierarchy. That's hard. But then say to my manager or leader after, hey, can I get 5 minutes? I just have some questions. If you're not going to speak up, that's on you. At some point, it's up to you to speak up.
Yeah, I agree. And that is another thing that I think is so hard. And sometimes in coaching sessions too, people will describe this problem that they're having, and it's clear that there's no communication around it. What would it look like to just ask for what you want? What? I can't do that.
Yeah. What a foreign concept.
Yeah. And we get nervous to ask for the things that we want, the things that we feel like we deserve. And yeah, it's really interesting to explore that. I think I don't know like what the hesitation is, if it's the actual communication. Like some people are like, I don't have a framework for this. I don't know how to ask for this.
Yeah.
But I think there's also this lens of some people don't believe that they deserve those things. Somewhere along the line, they were told those things were not okay, or they were told that those things were not socially acceptable or whatever it is. There's some inner dialogue there, in addition to sometimes there's a framework that is needed to actually ask for what you need.
100%. Yeah, that's all entirely valid. Those are all every reason you have for not speaking up is legit. Like I firmly believe that. Maybe it was the way you were brought up or your previous employment. It takes time. Like it's not an easy task. I completely understand that. But I will also say anyone who's listening to this episode or any of your episodes is a growth focused individual, right? And in order to do that, you've got to sometimes do the things that are hard for you. And even if it means maybe not getting the question you want asked, maybe it's a question adjacent. Like maybe it's, I want to ask you about this because I think it's a silly KPI, but maybe I'll ask you about something else. Like you've got to scratch that itch little by little until you're able to really get where you need to be. Otherwise, you're going to be frustrated and you're going to be dissatisfied with your workload and you're going to look to go somewhere else. But the problem isn't somewhere else or this place. It's how you're handling the situations around you.
Yeah. And I think going back to psychological safety too, I think people have an opportunity to almost demand psychological safety, but in the form of asking questions, being really curious and learning to ask questions. And if you sense that you don't have that psychological safety and that's a need for you, you can formulate questions around this. Like you can stand up for yourself, you can stand up for others and ask questions that encourage your leader, whoever's in that room, to think about your perspective, like how you're seeing things. And then maybe that's a catalyst for them to evaluate, oh, how am I approaching this? What is the real question here? What's the real issue here for that?
So many times I've been in meetings and I'm always impressed by the person who asks questions. Like for anyone who's hesitant or not sure if they should ask questions, for me at least, if there's that one or two individuals who ask that extra question and I'm always, man, good for you. Like I was wondering that too. Maybe I wasn't thinking it, but now I am and I want to know how to solve this too. So sometimes you're doing somebody else a favor by asking that question. And so you think there's this great load of pressure on you. Yeah, maybe there is a little bit, but trust me, people want to hear your question asked. No doubt.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing I'll add to that too is people can tell the difference between just asking a question to talk and asking a question because you're actually curious.
Yeah.
So when you're thinking about the questions you want to ask, go back to the motivators, right? Go back to your motivators. Why are you asking this question? Is it so you can hear your voice? Is it so you can show to other people that you're in the room? Is there some sort of status thing associated with it? Or is it actually something that you're curious about, something that is connected to your intrinsic motivators, your purpose, your why, like whatever? Is it meaningful?
Nailed it. 100%. Like it's such a, like, I don't know how we got to this topic, but it's so important. I'm so glad that we did because I'm just sitting I'm like going through all these meetings in my head where I've been around folks who've done this or I've done it. And every time I'm like, yeah, that was cool. I'm glad someone did that. Like it was so helpful for me and for them. And the project moved along. When I have a team meeting and maybe there's 60 people on that meeting, which is far too many, and somebody asks the question, I'm like, good for you. That was great. Like now I get to think about this problem in a different way or maybe explain it in a different way because everyone learns differently. So I think as a leader, it also makes me better because I have to be able to understand my own process so that I can deliver the message clearly. If you can explain it in like a few words and everyone understands, you understand the process really well. But if you have to this long, drawn out explanation, what I'm doing right now, you are maybe losing folks. So there we go.
Hmm. Okay. So how many people do you manage?
Great question. So it's funny. I technically don't really manage many. I think I manage maybe two people. I am more of like a mentor. Of course, I can tell people what to do, but that's because our environment is one of respect. Like I can say, hey, you should do this, or this is what we're doing as a company. Let's roll it out. Let me see how you can do with it. So it's more like we've all earned the respect from each other that if Mark tells you something to do, you're going to do it. It's not because I'm your hierarchy, I'm your boss. So in that world, there's probably 60 folks who would probably do something that I asked them to do, if that's the explanation. But so yeah, so I guess about 60. But again, I'm in a fantastic space where people they aren't my direct reports; they don't report directly to me. So I'm more of like a creative thinker. I help them with the tech and programming and rolling out of new services, but I'm not their boss. I'm just there to make them better. And so even if I was their boss, I think that still would be the way I go about it. Yes, I'm your boss and this is the way the org chart sits, but ultimately I'm here to make you better. No matter what my title is, if I'm below you, above you, to the left of you, to the right of you, it's all about supporting you however I can.
Yeah. But you're still coming in to these various different centers and teams. And here's the technology, here's how you use it, and how it folds into our model. And so I'm thinking about the customer experience needs to be consistent,
Mhm.
probably center. But like you as a leader, I can hear you have an approach where everyone's different, right? People are different. You have to adapt your leadership style and the way that you speak to people, the way that you ask questions, of ask people to do things. So I'm curious, like, where's that balance of ensuring that there is that consistency, but you're meeting the needs of each individual and how they show up?
Yeah. I think some things are really important to recognize when you're going to talk to somebody about their expectations or a branded experience, as we'll say. So I think it's first and foremost, there's some things you can't deviate from. This is the way it has to be because this is what we're delivering on. Someone comes into our center, they get greeted with a hello, as an example, right? It's not like you're on your phone. That's non-negotiable. This is the way it's got to be. And so some things you can't deviate from. But how we get our results, ultimately, you can be tolerant of other things. So if somebody does it one way, but it still follows the process, then sure, we can be flexible. But ultimately, if we're checking all the boxes we need checked, then I'm happy. By the end of the day, I'm responsible with hitting revenue goals. So we have, as I said, it's about 60 clubs or so, 50 plus clubs. And so we have to do a certain sales goal at the end of every month, at the end of every year. And so if your club isn't hitting the goal, obviously paying attention the whole time. So day after day, week after week, I'm trying to figure out what you're doing and why it's not producing the result we want. And then try to correct it. Are you missing an area of opportunity? Are you not understanding why this is important for us to do? Or what support do you need? So at the end of the day, the people who I report to are going to say, hey, this location missed their goal. What are you going to do about
Mhm.
it? I got to figure out what to do. As you were saying, it's about dealing with people in different ways to figure out what's important to them to get them to their goal. Are some people super revenue focused and they want to be the number one sales site in our company? Yeah, let's make it happen. Let's go for it. Let's push you. I'm gonna make you compete against other organizations or other facilities so that you get motivated by their sales goals. Or maybe you're really motivated by the medical side and you just want to really help people. That's great too. Let's talk about that some more. And so at the end of the day, it's ultimately it comes down to it's a business. So we got to make money. And so it's about finding ways to help people go through our branded process as best we can.
Yeah, that's interesting. It reminds me a little bit of like my agency days where there's a standard procedure. This is how we do things, those non negotiables that you talked about. But then there's also like an approach to
Mm.
that can be customized per person. I knew agency side, there's all these steps, all these things that I have to go through, but I can do those my way. And that's what
Right.
makes me good at my job. That's what makes people want to work with me. That's what makes me unique. in what I offer. So it sounds like you're understanding, okay, here's what the SOP is, but this is the way that you're doing it. And maybe it's helping, maybe it's not, and finding the different levers to tweak in that approach with people.
Yep. 100%. I think, as we were saying, the deviations are okay as long as we're hitting, as long as it's in company standard and it's branded and it's cool. We're not talking about anything wild here. But if you're hitting your metrics, your X, Y, Z are supposed to happen and it's happening, but you're doing it in your own way and it's still in the company brand, et cetera, then great. That's cool. I want you to be creative. I want you to have fun with it as long as you're, again, checking those boxes. But if you're doing X, not Y, and you're doing Z, and I can see that you're not hitting your goals, well, I'm going to tell you to start doing Y, because we know that this X, Y, Z are the reason. We've done the research. We've done all the research. We know why. We know that this will work and why it will work. And so if what you're doing isn't working, then it's time to get back to the plan. That's monitor those small things and everything else gets a lot easier.
Hmm. It reminds me of a concept that I think a lot of leaders need to adopt if they haven't already, which is just like your way is not always the best way or the right way.
Sure.
And there are many ways to reach a goal. I see a lot of new leaders struggle with this too, because they want to do things their way and they want their team to do things their way. But it goes back to our earlier conversation of just allowing people to have more autonomy in what they're doing. And maybe you've given them, here are the non-negotiables, here's how I do it, but I want you to take the reins and figure out what works for you while still meeting those goals, which I think is really important as a leader.
Yeah, we want to make sure that in any business, fitness, whatever, a storefront, brick and mortar, if you have multiple locations or you're an agency and you have multiple team members under you, you want to make sure you're delivering a branded experience because, again, you've done the research, this works. You want to make sure you're putting your best foot forward. If everyone is doing their own thing, winging it every time, it's not going to be a good experience. It's not to say that may not work once. It may work twice, but it's not going to be long-term a good experience. You can't replicate it. And therefore it's not something you want to go with. So as long as we say, okay, these 3 things need to happen when someone joins the gym, as an example, in the first 7 days. If you do these 3 things, their chance of success is so much higher. And we want them to be successful because we want them to be happy and healthy, et cetera. So do these 3 things. That's it. Beyond that, how you get to do those 3 things, that's up to you in a way. But we need to make sure these boxes are getting checked.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious about the level of, I'm trying to think of how to put this, or like maybe the adoption rate of a data driven strategy for the people that you go to and you say, hey, this is what the data says, because you're probably looking at the data all the time. You're probably using the data to tell stories, to make decisions. But do you ever approach situations where you have to teach people how to do that? Teach people how to lean into data, how to use data in that way? And what does that look like, if so?
Yeah, that's one of the more important things I think about being a leader in today's world is we have access to all this information, right? And more, it's getting faster and quicker as we go, even as we're having this conversation. And so I think one of the larger problems is our team members aren't bought into the same process we are. They're not drinking the Kool-Aid the same way we are. And so they work with us, but they do it probably for a little different reason. Maybe they just saw the job posting online. They were just looking for something new. So they're not really all in, whereas like I'm all in. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's a large part of my responsibility is helping them understand why we do things, because people will follow you. They'll do the things you want them to do if they understand why. But if it doesn't make sense to them, they're not going to do it. It's just the way it goes. Our human nature is such, and especially if they are like diametrically opposed to what we're trying to do. If they don't have the same core values. If their goal isn't to help people live a healthier, happier life, then they're not going to do the things we want them to do because that's what we're trying to do here. So I'm sure you've heard, make sure you have the right people on the bus. So if you have to make sure your team members are there for the right reasons, their core values, their why or their super why. And then from there, let them understand what you're trying to do. Be very vocal about what the goal of the organization is. That's super important. And it's not the goal of, we want to bring in 5 million. We're trying to raise 100 million. That doesn't mean anything to them because that's not money that's directly reflected to them. But if you say, we're trying to reach this many users because when users use our platform, they are more likely to X, right? Or like they're more likely to lose 10 pounds or live a happier life or report lower signs of depression or anxiety. That people can get on board for, especially in our organization. But if they aren't aware of that, then it's just another corporate process that they're going to wait out. they're going to wait till there's another one and then they'll not do that one either. So they have to be bought into those statistics, but you also have to make sure that it's relevant. Don't just
Mhm.
shoot out some stats that mean nothing to anyone.
Yeah, the start with why, I think, leads us into the storytelling, and then you're leveraging that data. You said something that I really liked. You said why and super why. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. So like a why is, a why is what everyone thinks is the big why, like the surface value of like, why do you join the gym? I want to lose weight. But your super why is you want to lose weight because I want to, well, I would even go further. Your why was like, I want to lose weight. Okay. Why do you want to lose weight? I want to look better in a bathing suit. Your super why is, well, when I go to the beach, I want to make sure that people are staring at me for good reasons and not bad reasons. Or like when I was heavier growing up, using a beach as an example, I would always wear a t-shirt at the beach or the pool, right? Because I was insecure. So my super why, or my why was not to lose weight, but my super why was to get myself confident so I can go to the beach or go to the pool and hang out with my friends and have a good time. So there's a reason behind the reason. And so that's super why, the real reason that people are doing what they want to do. So you got to ask like one more question. Why are you
Yeah,
here? Why do you work for us? Because I like what our company does, but why do you like what our company does? Why is that important to you? I like what our company does because I like helping dogs, but why is helping dogs important to you? When I was a kid, we had a puppy. And so that's the why. That's the super duper why. That's the reason people are doing what they want to do.
I love that so much. I'm so bought into that. And what Mark is describing, if you want to put a name to that process, is the five. There's a couple different versions, but there's the five whys, where it's essentially just like drilling down into that real reason, like what's the real issue. This is what we try to do in coaching too.
Right.
And it's so important. You can do it with your team, you can do it for yourself. But I love that super why. I don't think I've heard it in that way. So I like that language, but it's so important in all areas of your life and especially as leaders because it helps uncover those motivators.
Sure. And you can go even deeper. And ultimately, people do things to either bring themselves joy or alleviate some fear, right? That's what it comes down to at the
Mhm.
end of it all. But we don't have to go that deep on it. But ultimately, that's what we're looking for. You want to get a higher paying job or you want to move up the ladder. Why is that important to you? Okay, now why is that
Mhm.
important to you? And so in like fitness, this is pretty common. We ask these questions often because we have to figure out why people are really joining the gym, or more importantly, why weren't they successful at their last attempts at exercise? Because there's usually, oh, my schedule got too crowded or whatever it is. So you say, why did that get in your way? How long has this been a problem, et cetera? So you keep diving into those discovery questions. To our point, to continue to ask that why is very important. I think Simon Sinek says people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And that's everything. Like, I want you to be passionate about what you're doing. And maybe you're not at the organization that's making you passionate, but you can find something in your role that really like lights your fire.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of my favorite Simon Sinek quotes too. I love his concepts around the golden circle and really let's start with why. Okay, what is a leadership topic that you don't feel like is talked about and surfaced enough that you believe should be more openly discussed?
We touched on a lot of that in our conversation already, but I think to summarize that, it's more of an accountability aspect. So accountability sometimes has a negative connotation where it's I'm holding this person accountable to being on time. Yeah, that's one aspect of accountability, but I like to flip it on the other side. Like, you also are accountable to this person's growth and fulfillment. So like oftentimes what happens I've noticed is team members will talk to me about someone that works under them. So let's say the manager says at their location, there's a team member who just isn't getting it. Maybe they're showing up late or they're not wearing their name tag or when they answer their phone, they say something crazy. And so they'll just vent about this person. And so I'll often say to them, this is your fault. You should have addressed this earlier. You should have talked to them at an earlier time, addressed it immediately, and then move forward. And I'm not saying yell them or pull them aside and give them a stern talking, but
Mhm.
let them know that, hey, we don't do that. We don't do things like that here. This is why we say what we say, going back to teaching people and letting them try again and then try again. We have to be prepared to give feedback often. And then it's not so hard to give it, right? Like, people wait for their annual reviews or they know that there's a one-on-one catch up a month from now. So they're going to wait to say everything then. That's the wrong approach. Like, coach often, coach early, think of it as opportunity. And I think that's one of the biggest things. And then to piggyback from there, is once you've had that first conversation, you maybe coach somebody on something, follow up, like really follow up, ask. And even if you think it's silly, like it's so obvious that they've done the thing you've asked them to do, like it's show up on time or deliver this product by the deadline, and they've done it. You think it's so obvious, but they put work in, they put effort in. So acknowledge it. Go to them. Hey, we talked about your deadlines and you were missing some, but you nailed it. You nailed this one. Good for you. Or be prepared to have that conversation again. Early on, I read a book, which many people probably have. It's called The 1 Minute Manager. And that's solid to me. It's 1 minute goal setting, 1 minute praise, 1 minute reprimand. And so things go well when you keep it simple, you keep it concise, and you do those things often. And the rest of your day can be spent doing the things that you want to do, like being productive, future thinking, or working on the business, not in the business. To summarize, it's the aspect of accountability. Don't be scared to hold people accountable. You, in fact, owe them the opportunity to be successful. And when you don't do that, you're setting them up to fail. And that's on you.
I love the concept of accountability as a leader too. And thinking about, yes, you have to hold others accountable. And then what are you accountable for as a leader? You talking about giving feedback, right? Like you are accountable for that. And you really need to lean into it and understand like when you should be doing it, why you should be doing it, how often, everything that you said. But I think that's a good reflection question for people is as a leader, what are you accountable for? And are you doing those things? And if you're not, what support or what resources do you need to hold yourself accountable?
I was at a conference, and this speaker who I like a lot opened up, right? He walks on the gym floor, very charismatic, and he goes, raise your hand if you have anybody on your team who you think you should fire. And we all were like, yeah, 100%. And he said, you're a bad manager. I said, wow, that was like a drop the mic moment. But as he extended on, he's like, you're failing that person. You're a bad manager. You're not leading this person to be better. If you're still talking about the same person for 6 months, that's on you. And I'm sure you could turn around and say, staffing, hiring is hard. We don't have the right, it's hard to get good people. Maybe it's because what you're tolerating. Like you're putting out there that you're going to tolerate. You're going to stay with us for 6 months. Why would anybody want to join your organization when you're letting like problematic individuals stay on your team? But you've got to give them the opportunity to grow. And if they truly don't belong there, then they don't belong there. Do them the favor and let them know that they should maybe find a job that's better suited. So that's a cruel way to say it, but back to your point, like accountability is so important. And it's something I struggled with. That's why I know it's so important, because I struggled with it and it made me a bad manager. And now that I'm getting better at it, it's still hard for me. I'm no longer a bad manager. I'm working towards being a good leader.
Love that. Okay, you've already given a lot of really good resources, but thinking about for leaders out there that are looking to really enhance their personal and professional development, what resources or exercises would you recommend?
So I think this is where I recommend like 10 different books and everyone pretends they're going to go buy them. So that's the other frustrating thing. There's so much information, right? So we tend to gobble our stuff on social media or in other methods, but the reality is the thing that I find most effective is like taking a self-assessment. What are my goals? Something you touched on earlier. And what are they actually? Not just like I have to hit my sales goal. Why do I want to hit my sales goal? And then something I ask my team all the time is when I ask them their goals, I ask, do your actions line up with your goals? If you tell me you want to be the number one sales generating fitness center, or you want to be the number one personal trainer in the country, or whatever it is, and your actions don't line up with that, then, you know, something's wrong. Either your goals aren't accurate or your actions need to be different. So that's important, because you also don't want to let yourself down by having these false expectations to what your goals actually are. So I guess my advice would be to take a self-assessment often, like really often, not just like once a year, but on a frequent basis. Am I doing what I want to do? And am I acting like this is the thing I want to do? So there's tons of books, there's tons of podcasts. Try to learn in different ways. Don't try to seek out information. It'll come to you, of course, but like talk to folks, listen to podcasts. And as you're already listening to this. So the chances are you're, again, a growth mindset individual. But surround yourself with mentors, other people in other fields doing kick-ass stuff. See what they're doing, because it all translates to other fields as well.
Yeah, great advice, because you could read all the books, you can do all of those things that you just mentioned. But the first thing you mentioned, take an assessment. If you don't do that, all of the other stuff is pretty useless. You know, you've got to have a baseline. You've got to know where you're at.
And that's okay. I think the first step is, of course, is realizing that you don't know everything and that you've got to learn and you're willing to go through that process. If there's someone on your team that is holding you back, so to speak, because they're not delivering what you have to, so take a self-assessment. So why haven't you talked to that person yet? What's holding you back? What's the potential negative? What's the potential positive? What can you do in this situation to make the negatives less and the positive better? Take that self-assessment and then do the thing you need to do. Stop waiting. Go do it.
Go do it. All right, Mark, this has been so awesome. I feel so lucky to have gotten the chance to chat with you and Lauren and have such like great conversations. So maybe next time I'll get invited to the dinner party or
Yeah,
something.
for sure. It's usually like dino nuggets or something like that with my daughter,
I'm
but
down with the dino nuggets.
yeah, you're welcome anytime.
I appreciate you so much. Thank you for coming on and sharing some of your wisdom and your stories. And yeah, I know that there is many golden nuggets in this conversation. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. I hope you walk away with something empowering that you can take into your own leadership journey. Are you a high-performing executive looking to take your career to the next level? Or maybe you're an emerging leader who wants to develop the skills you need to advance in your role and show up authentically. Or maybe you're experiencing burnout and struggling to find a better work-life balance. Whatever your situation is, one-on-one coaching can help you achieve your personal and professional goals. If you're interested in experiencing the power of coaching for yourself, head on over to hypehousecoaching.com/start coaching now, where you can set up a one-on-one leadership and executive coaching intro session for free. Remember, the only hype that really matters is the hype within.